In this story, a woman will trade every memory she's ever loved to save a man who won't remember her name by morning, and the cruelest part? She starts the ritual before anyone tells her what she's already agreed to give up. Chapter 1. Seraphine Ashveil had not slept past 4 in the morning in 3 years. Not because she was some kind of extraordinary person. Not because she had ambitions that burned too bright to let her rest. She was up at 4 because the market vendors on Greystone Lane accepted deliveries at 4:30, and every copper coin she collected before the rest of the town rubbed sleep from its eyes was a copper coin she didn't have to beg for later. That was the whole of it. Survival arithmetic. Nothing glamorous about it. What she wouldn't say out loud, what she barely let herself think, was that she was afraid. Not the sharp, useful kind of fear that makes you run from something. The slow kind. The kind that takes up permanent residence somewhere behind your ribs and redecorates. It whispered constantly, what if the rent goes up? What if the physician raises his rates? What if Finn's cough comes back worse this winter than the last? She'd had this fear so long she'd stopped noticing its voice. It just ran in the background, like the sound of the mill wheel, always there, always grinding. And the tragedy of it, the thing she couldn't see because she was too deep inside it, was what it cost her. She moved through her days like a woman underwater, present in body, completely elsewhere in mind, always already in tomorrow, bracing for things that hadn't happened yet. Finn would laugh at the dinner table, a real, surprised laugh, the kind a 12-year-old makes when something genuinely delights him. And Seraphine would hear it from 2 rooms away and feel the flicker of it, and then immediately think, how long does his laughter sound like that before the cough comes? Before the money runs out? Before something goes wrong? She'd been living like that for 3 years. She'd stopped counting what it was costing her. The one thing that set her apart from anyone else in Valdres, the thing she told absolutely no one, was what she could see. Fate threads. Golden, gossamer lines, thin as spider silk and brighter than any candle, stretched between people. Every person she'd ever laid eyes on carried at least one. The merchant with the apple stall had a thread running to his wife across town, currently the color of burned caramel, hot and brittle, fraying at the middle. The young girls at the water well had threads reaching toward each other that neither of them had noticed yet, new gold, curious and tentative. The old man who sat on the church steps each morning had a thread that went nowhere she could follow. It just trailed off into the distance and disappeared, which she suspected meant something she didn't want to think about. She'd had this sight since she was small. She'd learned to hide it around the same time she'd learned that calling things by their true names in this town got you labeled strange, and strange girls didn't get work, and girls who didn't get work didn't eat. So she locked it behind her eyes, used it quietly, told no one. The thread on her own wrist she'd stopped looking at years ago. The last time she had really looked, not just glanced, it had been fraying so badly she'd gone cold for the rest of the day and hadn't slept that night at all. Threads frayed when the person carrying them spent too long being afraid. She knew that the way she knew everything she knew about threads, instinctively, without anyone teaching her, without a shred of proof. It was a Tuesday in late autumn, just as the candles in the town hall were being lit for evening, that everything broke open. She was walking home, arms full of unsewn bolts of fabric, another last-minute order from Madame Courant, always urgent, always tonight, always the kind of request she agreed to because she needed the coin, and Madame Courant knew she needed the coin. She had flour in her hair from somewhere, and both her feet hurt, and she was already calculating whether she'd sleep 3 hours or 4 before the morning delivery. Then she saw it. A thread, from her own wrist. That alone would have been enough to stop her cold. Her thread never ran anywhere. It just existed on her wrist like a scar. But this thread was new, or newly awakened. She could feel it the way you feel the sun come out from behind clouds, not the heat exactly, but the sudden absence of cold. The thread blazed gold so bright it hurt to look at directly, and it ran from her wrist across the cobblestones, out past the square, and straight into the dark mouth of the ashwood at the edge of town. No thread went into the ashwood. Nothing went into the ashwood. The town had an unspoken agreement with that forest. You didn't go in after dark, and it didn't send anything back out. It was not a rule written anywhere. It was just true. The way the cold in February is true. The way certain silences between people carry a weight that words never could. Sarah. Lyra appeared at her shoulder the way she always did, like she'd materialized out of the crowd specifically to complicate Seraphine's evening. She had flour of her own on her cheek from the bakery, and a grin that had no business being that bright at this hour. "You look like you've seen something dead. Has Corinth cut your pay again because I swear to every saint? I have to go somewhere." Seraphine's eyes stayed on the ashwood's dark edge. The thread tugged. She felt it in the bones of her wrist. "Stay with Finn until he sleeps. Tell him I'm finishing an order. Seraphine." Lyra dropped the grin. She knew that tone. "Where?" "I don't know." She pushed the fabric bolts into Lyra's arms before the argument could start, and she followed the thread into the dark. The ashwood at night was not just a forest. It was the idea of a forest older, denser, stranger than any collection of trees had a right to be. The canopy ate the moonlight. What reached the ground came through in pieces, scattered silver that landed wrong, at angles that didn't match the branches above. The trees themselves were ancient and twisted, and grew into each other's space without apology, their roots surfacing and diving through the earth like the backs of sleeping creatures. Seraphine pushed through underbrush, following the blazing thread, and the world behind her, the market, the cobblestones, the familiar weight of her ordinary life, became very far away very fast. She heard him before she saw him. Not a sound, exactly more like the opposite. A sudden specific silence, the kind a body makes when it stops moving and hits the ground. She ran toward it, crashing through low branches, and came out into a small clearing where the trees had pulled back enough to let a slice of moonlight reach the earth. He was on his knees when she first saw him. Then slowly, with the exhausted dignity of a man whose body had made a unilateral decision, he went sideways. Seraphine did not stand there processing it. She crossed the clearing and was on her knees beside him before she'd consciously decided to move. 2 fingers to his throat. His pulse was there. Thin and too fast, but there. The thread between them burned so bright that for a second she could see it even with her eyes closed. He was tall, dark-haired, his face all hard angles and something carved and fierce in the jaw, softened entirely now by unconsciousness. His clothes had been expensive once, silk at the collar, heavy cloak, a ring on his right hand with a crest she didn't recognize. All of it was ruined. Torn at the shoulder. Dark stains, she told herself, were mud. And his forearms, where his sleeves had ridden up strange burns, rings of them, pink and pulsing with a faint dark light that her gut said was not natural. That her gut said was not of this world. She got him out of the ashwood through a combination of stubbornness and borrowed muscle, 2 coins to the blacksmith's apprentice, to ask no questions and carry the man's other shoulder. She got him into the back room of her cottage. She cleaned the burns, covered him with the warmest blanket she owned, and sat in the chair beside him while the candle burned low. Finn appeared in the doorway at midnight. His eyes went straight to the man on the chaise, then to Seraphine. "Sarah," he said, "is that a prince?" "No. Go to bed. He's wearing a signet ring." "Finn." "The crest has—" "Bed," she pointed. He went, dragging his feet, looking back twice. She waited until she heard his door close, then turned back to the man on the chaise. She didn't sleep. She sat with the burning thread between them, and the question she couldn't answer yet, and she watched him breathe. Chapter 2. He woke just before dawn. Seraphine knew the exact moment the quality of the room changed, the way a room does when someone in it becomes conscious. She looked up from the sewing she'd been pretending to do and found him watching her. He was very still, like a man who'd woken somewhere strange enough times that stillness had become the default response, the thing he reached for before anything else. His eyes were gray, storm gray, with blue buried underneath, the kind of color that shifts depending on the light. They were very direct. "Where am I?" he said. "Valdris, my house. You collapsed in the ashwood." She kept her voice even. "Do you know who you are?" He was quiet for a moment, not confused, more like a man listening for something internal, checking the inventory. "My name is Kael." He said it with certainty. Then the certainty fractured. "But yesterday..." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "Yesterday is gone." Gone how? Gone. Completely. He looked at his hands, at the burns on his forearms, and the expression that crossed his face was grief worn smooth by repetition. "I closed my eyes last night, and I opened them this morning, and the day before simply doesn't exist." He said it steadily, not performing calm. Just steady, in the way of someone who has been steadied by necessity for long enough that it's become structural. "This happens every night. I lose a day." Seraphine sat with that for a moment. "Every day you wake up and you don't remember the day before." "I keep notes." He glanced toward his coat, which she'd draped over the chair. She could see the edge of a leather journal in the inner pocket. "I read them each morning. They tell me who I am and what I've been doing. But reading it..." He stopped, looked at the window. "Reading it isn't the same as remembering. It's like reading about someone else." She said nothing. She'd found, in 23 years of dealing with things that were difficult and real, that silence was often the most honest response to something you couldn't fix with words. He looked at her then, and something shifted in his face, the grief smoothing back into something more present. "You're not asking 100 questions," he said. "I'm asking them, just internally." He almost laughed. It was a small thing, just the edge of one, but it was real. She could tell the difference. Practical. "You're in my house at dawn with strange burns and no memory. I'd rather understand the situation than react to it." "That's..." He paused, and now there was something in his expression she couldn't quite place. Warmth wasn't the right word. Recognition, maybe. "That's rare." She got up and put oatmeal on, because that was what you did, because the body needed feeding regardless of how complicated everything else was. She'd noticed, in crisis situations, that eating gave people somewhere to put their hands while their minds caught up. He ate like she'd never seen a person eat. Not desperately, not greedily. Slowly, like every spoonful was worth paying attention to. He touched the jar of honey before using it, turned it slightly to see how the morning light caught the amber. He noticed everything. She found herself watching him notice things, and then catching herself watching and looking back at her own bowl. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "You eat like the oatmeal owes you something." His mouth curved. "I eat like this is the only bowl of oatmeal that exists." He set down the spoon. "Which, for all practical purposes this morning, it is. I don't know what I ate yesterday. I'll have forgotten this tomorrow." He looked up. "So I try to be here for what I actually have." The candle on the table had burned down to almost nothing. Early light was starting to come through the window at a low, gold angle. Seraphine sat across from this strange, ruined man she'd pulled out of a forest, and she felt something shift in the machinery of her mind, just a small thing. A gear she hadn't known was stuck, easing slightly. She'd been cataloging worries since before she'd finished her coffee that morning. For 30 seconds, she hadn't been. It scared her almost as much as the thread. Chapter 3. He told her the truth once Finn had gone to school and Lyra had been bribed into temporary silence with the promise of 3 future loaves. The back room was small and close, smelling of beeswax and old wool, and Kael sat on the chaise and spoke with the careful precision of someone reciting a map he'd memorized because he couldn't trust his own navigation. Kael Donreth was the crown prince of the Shadow Court. The Shadow Court was real. It existed in the borderland between night and day, between the seen world and the world that ordinary people had collectively decided not to look at too directly, not out of ignorance, but out of the particular sanity that comes from understanding some doors are better left. It was a kingdom in every practical sense. It had politics, a throne, a royal house, and a 3-generation history of holding the boundary between the mortal world and everything beyond the Ashwood. Kael had grown up inside it, trained there, had a life there, people, loyalties, griefs, most of which the curse had systematically dismantled. 7 months ago, the forgetting had started. The curse was elegant in its cruelty, the way the cruelest things always are, designed precisely to maximize what it took and minimize what it left. Every night when he closed his eyes, the most recent day dissolved. Not his skills, not his name, not the deep bedrock of who he was, just the surface, just yesterday. Just the faces of anyone he'd spoken to, the weight of anything he'd learned, the specific texture of everything that had mattered most recently. Gone. Every morning he woke as a man who knew the shape of his life, but had lost another day of actually living it. He kept the journal because without it he'd have lost himself entirely in the first month. He wrote obsessively everything, every conversation, every observation, every thread of feeling that he could capture before sleep took it. He read it faithfully every morning. It gave him continuity without giving him memory, which was a specific kind of grief he'd stopped trying to describe to people. "And it's getting worse," he said. Not a question. A fact he was stating so she would have it. "Worse how?" Seraphine said. "Faster. The older memories, the ones that should be safe, the ones that aren't recent enough for the curse to touch, they're starting to blur at the edges." He said it quietly. "I used to be able to see my mother's face clearly. Last week I couldn't remember the color of her eyes. I had to look it up in my own notes." His hands were still on his knees. "If it runs its course, I'll forget everything. My name, my brother's face, every person I've ever—" He stopped. His jaw worked once. There's a word for what's left at the end of that process. In the Shadow Court's oldest texts. I don't say it. The room was very quiet. Outside, Valdris was going about its morning wheels on cobblestones, a vendor calling out, a dog barking twice at something and then giving up, all of it ordinary, all of it very far away. "You're calm," Seraphine said. She didn't mean it as a compliment or a criticism. She meant it as an observation she needed to understand. He looked at her. "The first 2 months I wasn't. I spent them doing exactly what you'd expect, calculating. Projecting the rate of loss, estimating how long before I'm gone in any meaningful sense. Lying awake anticipating a future I couldn't stop. And one morning I read my notes from that period and realized I had no real memory of it. Not because the curse had taken it, because I hadn't been there for it. I was so completely living in a terrible tomorrow that hadn't happened yet. I'd spent 2 months erasing myself faster than the curse could." He leaned forward slightly. His eyes, in the morning light, were more blue than gray. "People worry about tomorrow like it's promised," he said. "Like it's already theirs. Like if they just prepare enough, plan enough, brace enough." He shook his head, and the gesture wasn't dismissive. It was tired, but nothing about tomorrow is promised. You could spend a year worrying about what to eat, and what to wear, and how to fix everything, and then— He stopped, looked at her directly. "What if tomorrow never gets to meet you? What if this— He gestured at the room, at the candle stub, at the bowl of oatmeal still on the table is everything. Wouldn't you want to have actually been inside it? Seraphine thought about her own thread, the fraying one she'd stopped looking at. She thought about how many mornings she'd sat in this very room counting what might go wrong while the good light came through the window and she hadn't once noticed the way it fell. She said none of this. Instead, you need somewhere to stay while you're in Valdres. You can't go back through the Ashwood alone. She stood, because she had deliveries to make and a living to earn, and standing was easier than sitting with everything he'd just said. The back room is yours. Don't let Finn interrogate you, he will try. Don't tell Lyra anything she doesn't already know. She paused at the door. And don't touch my sewing. Seraphine. She turned. Her name in his mouth was a different sound than she'd expected. Like he'd already decided it was worth saying carefully. Thank you, he said, for treating it like it was real. It is real. Yes. He held her eyes. Most people make a face when I say it, like they're trying to decide if I'm dangerous or mad. I've already decided you're neither. She pulled on her coat. I'll figure out what you actually are later. She left, got 3 blocks before she realized she hadn't thought about tomorrow once since she sat down across from him. 3 blocks of nothing, no calculations, no dread, just cold autumn air and the sound of her own boots on stone. She stopped in the middle of the street, stood there, tried to remember the last time that had happened. She couldn't. Chapter 4. He stayed 3 days, and in that time he quietly undid several things Seraphine had believed were permanent. He fixed the kitchen cabinet hinge. Not because she asked she hadn't mentioned it, but because he noticed it catching and found it interesting in the way he found everything interesting. With his hands already reaching before his mind finished deciding, he sat with Finn every evening and listened to her brother talk about rocks, an entire hierarchy of rocks sorted by worth, which was entirely Finn's own invention and had its own internal logic with the full, undivided attention of a man who had genuinely never heard about rock hierarchies and found this a gap in his education worth correcting. He's different, Finn told Seraphine on the second night, with the blunt authority 12-year-olds wield when they've made an assessment. He actually listens. Like, the whole time. Not the thing where you can tell someone is waiting for you to stop so they can say something. I know, Seraphine said. Do you like him? Go to sleep, Finn. On the 3rd morning, she came home from the market to find him at the kitchen table with his journal open, reading. He looked up when she came in, the brief shadow crossing his face as he oriented himself, rebuilt the bridge from the notes to the present. She'd started recognizing that shadow. She'd started dreading it. I wrote that you showed me something yesterday, he said. Something you can see. But I didn't write what it was. He paused. I think I left it out on purpose. She set down her basket. Why? Because writing it down would have made it a data point. He looked at her steadily. I think it was more than that. He waited. Will you show me again? She took him to the market square. Standing at the edge of it with the morning crowd moving around them, she narrated what she saw, the threads, all of them, gold and amber and the occasional deep red of a connection that had calcified into anger. The thread between the apple merchant and his estranged wife, stretched to its limit, burning the color of a dying fire. The 2 young women at the well who'd been circling each other for weeks, their threads almost reaching. A small boy whose thread ran to an alley. She'd bet good money there was a stray cat in there. Kael tracked her words with his eyes moving over the square, looking at invisible things. He didn't nod along politely. He actually looked in the right direction every time, with the attention of someone genuinely trying to see what she saw rather than performing belief. And mine, he said. Not a question. She turned to face him. And she looked at the thread. Their thread. The one she'd been carefully not examining too closely since the night she'd pulled him out of the Ashwood. In the morning light of the market square, with the whole ordinary world moving around them, it blazed. There was no other word. It blazed between his wrist and hers like a live coal, gold so hot it was almost white at the center, wrapped around his wrist with an urgency that looked almost like pleading. She looked at her own wrist, at the thread she'd been avoiding for years. The fraying had slowed. She hadn't expected that. The surprise of it hit her like cold water, not painful, just sudden, the sharp edge of something real. The frayed edges were less ragged than they'd been 3 days ago. The thread itself was brighter. She had 3 days of not drowning in tomorrow to thank for it, and she knew it, and the knowing sat heavy in her chest. "Your thread," she said. Her voice stayed steady through practice. "Is the brightest thing I've ever seen. It's connected to me in a way that doesn't follow any of the rules I know about threads. It feels—" She stopped, tried again. Deliberate, like it chose. Kael was quiet. The market moved around them, a child shrieked with laughter, a cart rumbled past, 2 women haggled over the price of wool. He let all of it pass. "The Shadow Court scholars believe the curse doesn't just erase," he said finally. "They think it searches, burns through everything looking for something that can withstand it. An anchor old enough and real enough that the mechanism can't touch it." He paused. "My notes say I followed a golden thread into the ashwood. I followed it here." "You followed my thread?" "Yes." She stood with that. The thread between them pulsed once, like a heartbeat. She felt it in her wrist bone. "Can I see it?" he said quietly. "Your thread." She held out her wrist. He looked at the space above it, and his gaze landed exactly right, exactly where the thread was, with an accuracy that had no natural explanation. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "It's fraying," he said it gently, like someone naming something that had been true for a long time and hadn't been said yet. The breath went out of her. "How do you know that?" "I can feel it." He met her eyes, and his were very serious and very present and very close, and she had the sudden sharp awareness of how small the space between them had become. "You've been doing it for years, not on purpose. But you're so afraid of losing tomorrow that you're spending today burning through the thread that was supposed to carry you there." The market was loud around them. Someone's child knocked over a display of apples and the vendor cursed and people laughed. The world kept happening. Seraphine stood inside it and felt the specific vertigo of someone who has been told the truth about themselves by a person who had no business knowing it. Her throat was tight. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in front of another person since her mother's funeral, but it was the closest she'd come in 3 years. Kael didn't rush to fix it. He didn't offer solutions or comfort. He just stood there with her in the noisy, ordinary square, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him, and let the truth be true without trying to make it smaller. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in years. She noticed it. She locked it away. She went back to the practical problems of the afternoon. That evening, as Kael sat on her front steps watching the last of the sunset do what sunsets do, die slowly and magnificently, and without apology, Seraphine saw the man at the corner of the lane, gray clothes. No insignia. Not browsing, not passing through. Standing with the specific stillness of someone who is being paid to be still. Watching her house. The dread came back. It was familiar as an old coat. She went inside and closed the door. Chapter 5. She told Kael about the soldier. His stillness changed the peaceful kind, becoming the other kind, the kind with teeth under it. His jaw set. His hands closed on his knees. Gray, no insignia. None I recognized. Voss. He said the name like he was spitting something out. Lord Voss Mayrath. He was my father's advisor. His jaw worked. I believe the curse is his. I have notes on it. Evidence I've gathered and lost and gathered again over 7 months. He stood, crossed to the window with the controlled quiet of someone who'd been trained for exactly this. Not a soldier's training. Something more patient, more calculating than that. If his men saw me here, they've already flagged this house. They know who lives here. He turned from the window and looked at her. And there it was, the thing she'd waited for. The thing most men got to eventually. The "you need to go" expression. The "this is too dangerous for you" expression. The "let me handle this" expression that had never once in her experience come from anyone who actually understood what they were dealing with. "Don't," she said. He blinked. "Don't tell me to leave my own house," she said. "This is my home and my brother is in it, and I don't run from things that come to my door. I face them." She held his gaze. "So help me think instead of managing me." He was quiet for a beat, 2 beats. Something moved through his expression, surprise first, then something more settled. "All right," he said. "Then let's think." What they didn't account for was Lord Voss not waiting. He came the next morning. Kael had gone to the market with Finn, a reasonable decision at the time, catastrophically timed in practice, and Seraphine was alone when the knock came. She opened the door because she always opened her door. And there he was. Lord Voss Marath was beautiful, the way poison fruit is beautiful. It is the beauty of something designed to be picked up. He was perhaps 40, but wore it like 40 was a choice he'd made rather than a thing that had happened to him. Dark-haired, immaculate, with light eyes that moved over Seraphine's face in the 4 seconds before he spoke and catalogued everything they found. He was smiling. The smile never reached the eyes. "Miss Ashveil," he said warmly, like they were old friends, like he'd been looking forward to this. She said nothing. Sometimes the best response is making someone fill the silence themselves. He filled it. "Your brother Finn, 12 years old, the cough that won't fully resolve, the physician on the 1st and 3rd Monday of every month." He said this in the voice of a man reciting a pleasant list. "I know what you earn at the seamstress shop and what you spend on his care, and I know the gap between those 2 numbers keeps you awake." He tilted his head. "I'm a man who closes gaps." Seraphine's stomach turned to ice. Not from fear exactly, from recognition. This was a man who'd done this before, who came to doors with other people's vulnerabilities already memorized. Who thought of that as a kind of currency? "The prince," Voss said. "That's all. Tell me where he is. In exchange, your brother's medical costs vanish. Physician, medicines, all of it. For life." He looked at her pleasantly. "That's a significant offer." She thought about Finn's cough, the money she didn't have, the gap that never closed. She thought about Kael on her steps in the sunset, completely present, completely at peace, teaching her by example what it looked like to be inside your own life, instead of constantly bracing for it to fall apart. "I don't know anyone by that name," she said. The warmth left Lord Voss's face, just for a second a flicker, the mask adjusting, but she saw what was underneath it. Not anger. Something more patient than anger. Something that had been building for a long time, and had learned to be very, very quiet while it grew. "I'll be in town for a few days," he said pleasantly. He turned to leave, and around the corner of the lane came Kael and Finn, carrying market bread and talking about something that made Finn laugh. The laugh cut off the moment Finn saw the stranger. The moment Kael saw Voss, the bread hit the ground. Everything happened fast. Kael stepped in front of Finn not dramatically, just immediately, with the speed of someone for whom this was reflex, and the burns on his forearms lit up dark and bright at once. And the air between him and Voss went sharp and dense and wrong the way air feels before lightning finds the ground. "Finn," Seraphine said, very calm, very clear. "Inside, back room, lock it." Her brother went. He didn't argue, some part of him already understood. "Kael." Voss spread his hands in the gesture of a reasonable man. You look terrible. I've been worried. You did this to me. Kael's voice had a new register in it, older, harder, stripped of everything soft. I don't have all the details. You made sure of that. But I have enough. You have what I allowed you to keep, Voss said, and the pleasantness was entirely gone. What was left was not cruel. Exactly, it was something colder than cruelty, more settled. The face of a man who had made peace with who he was years ago and had no interest in revisiting the question. He glanced at Seraphine once quick, assessing, filing her away. Come home. The court needs you. Your mother asks. My mother wouldn't send you. That landed. Voss's expression tightened just slightly, and in that tightness, Seraphine saw something that surprised her. Not offense, not anger, hurt. Buried deep under everything else, old and infected like a wound that had never been cleaned. She didn't know what to do with that, so she set it aside. You have until the end of the week, Voss said quietly. After that, I stop asking. He looked at Seraphine one last time, and the look was not threatening. That was the worst part. It was apologetic. Think about your brother, Miss Ashveil. He walked away. The thread running from him back toward the ashwood was the color of old iron, dark and corroded and heavy with weight it had been carrying too long. Kael turned to her. His face was storm. I put you in the middle of this. You were unconscious, she said. I put myself in it. Seraphine. Stop. She stepped toward him and pointed at his chest. Do not waste the time we have standing in my street feeling guilty. Think. She dropped her hand. You said there's an oracle. Someone who knows about shadow court curses. Someone who might know how to break this one. He blinked. The storm in his face shifted into something more focused. The threadweaver, Alara. She lives at the border of the ashwood. I tried to reach her 6 weeks ago. I don't know why I failed. Then we try again. Seraphine went inside to get her coat. And this time I'm coming with you. Chapter 6. The hinge was not on any map. It existed on its own terms at the furthest edge of the ashwood, in the place where the trees grew oldest and most strange, the point where the forest was no longer quite forest, and the world beyond was no longer quite hidden. The path to it took the whole of a cold morning to find, and when they found it, it felt less like discovering, and more like it had decided to let them. The oracle's house was swallowed in plants. Deliberate, everywhere, vines laced across the windows and twisting through the eaves in patterns too precise for accident. The door was ancient oak gone gray as ash, carved with a symbol that Seraphine almost recognized, the way you almost remember a word in a language you used to speak. Kael knocked. The woman who opened it was old in the way that makes age irrelevant. The kind of old that belongs to things like tide patterns and mountain shapes, something that has passed so far through time, it has come out the other side into something else entirely. She was small, 5 feet at most, with white hair braided over one shoulder, and eyes that were flat, silver, no iris, no distinction between pupil and surround. Blind. Long blind. It did not seem to slow her. She turned, rather, with her blank silver eyes angled exactly right at Seraphine. Not at Kael. You finally brought her. The inside of the cottage hummed. Not metaphorically an actual, low, continuous sound, the kind that lives below words and above silence. Strings everywhere, hundreds of them, strung between hooks on the walls and the ceiling and the furniture, some made of fiber, and some of thin metal, and some of a gold, that Seraphine recognized instantly as not material in any ordinary sense. Fate threads, rendered physical. The oracle moved through them like water moves through water. She touched Kael's forearms first. The burns pulsed dully under her fingers. She made a sound low in her throat, something that wasn't a word but meant something. Then she turned to Seraphine and held out both hands, palms up. "Give me your hands." Seraphine looked at Kael. He gave her a small nod, not reassurance. Permission to make her own choice. She gave the oracle her hands. Alara held them. The hum in the room deepened. The gold strings near the window shivered all at once, a collective tremor, like reeds in a sudden wind. The oracle's thumbs pressed into Seraphine's palms with an odd, deliberate pressure, finding something specific. Then she released her, moved to the table, began to arrange things by touch, and spoke without looking up. All curses can be broken. The question is never whether, always what it costs. "What does this one cost?" Kael said. Flat. Direct. Alara paused. The silence had weight. "This curse erases presence," she said. "It can only be broken by an act of total presence. Someone who has learned to release the future. To stop gripping tomorrow with both hands and actually live in the now, not as a philosophy, not as a decision made once, but as a truth that's written in their thread." She turned her silver eyes toward Seraphine. That person must give their thread of fate willingly, literally. The tether connecting a living soul to the flow of time, offered freely into the curse. The room breathed. "What happens to the person who gives it?" Kael said, quieter now. "That," said Alara, "depends on things I am not yet ready to say." She moved among her strings, touching them one by one with her fingertips. "What I will tell you is this. Decisions have a way of making themselves. The conditions you need are here, in this room, right now. Tomorrow may not hold what today holds." She paused. A very deliberate pause. "In more ways than one." Seraphine had been looking at her wrist since the oracle started speaking, at the thread brighter than 3 days ago, burning with a quality she now recognized was not healing. It was being used, actively, like a coal that glows brightest just before it's spent. "The person you're describing," she said slowly, "who had to learn to release tomorrow the hard way." She felt Kael go very still beside her. Someone whose thread was fraying from years of anxiety and then started to heal when she stopped. "That's me. You're describing me." "Yes," said Alara. "Seraphine." Kael's voice was a closed door. Not angry absolute, the tone of someone for whom something has become non-negotiable in the time it took to say 2 syllables. "I know what she's saying," Seraphine said quietly. She looked at him. His face was completely still in the way it went, when something was happening underneath it that he was holding down by force. "She's saying I'm the one the curse would accept." "I'm not using you," he said, each word its own sentence. "That's not." "No, just the word, like a wall." Alara continued to touch her strings as though neither of them had spoken. They left without an answer. Walked back through the ashwood in a silence that was dense and complicated, and full of things neither of them had said. And the thread between them blazed so bright through the whole walk that Seraphine kept having to look away from her own wrist. Chapter 7. The forgetting started that evening. Not the overnight kind she'd been prepared for. Not the waking without a yesterday. Something different. Something she had no warning for. They'd come back from Alara's to Finn at his lessons, and Lyra at the door with news that Voss's men had been asking questions at every inn in town. They'd moved Finn to the bakery under the cover of a sleepover. They'd reinforced locks, mapped routes, planned with the steady practicality of 2 people who were good at staying functional when everything around them was falling apart. All of it necessary. All of it a way to not feel the thing that needed feeling. Past midnight, she brought a candle to the back room and found him at the small desk, journal open, staring at the page. He wasn't writing. He was very still. "Something's wrong," she said. This morning is gone. He said it quietly. The way you say a thing you've been sitting with long enough to have stopped being shocked by it. Not last night, I have notes for that. But this morning? The market. The walk. Even... He stopped. Looked at the page. I remember the Ashwood clearly. The oracle. You, in the clearing. He looked up. But this morning is almost entirely gone and I haven't even slept yet. The curse was accelerating. Not waiting for night anymore. Taking hours instead of days. Seraphine sat down across from him. She didn't try to fix it. Didn't reach for words that would reframe it or soften its edges. She'd learned, in the space of 3 days, that this was what he needed most, not comfort exactly, but company. Someone willing to sit in the hard thing with him without flinching away from how hard it was. Tell me something you still have, she said. Right now, something solid. He was quiet for a moment, searching. The angle of the light this afternoon when we got back. It came through the window and landed on the table in a shape that looked like a doorway. He paused. Finn laughing at something in his lesson book, I could hear him from this room. A real laugh, not the polite kind. He looked at her, and his voice was steady, but his eyes were saying something different, something unguarded. You in the Ashwood, telling me the thread between us was the brightest thing you'd ever seen. I have that. I'm sure of that. Something broke open in Seraphine's chest, and she didn't look away from it this time. She let it be open. She'd spent 3 years building careful walls against feeling things too fully, not out of coldness, out of survival, because she couldn't afford to be wrecked by things she couldn't control. She'd been so proud of those walls. They'd kept her functional. They'd kept Finn fed. And in 4 days this man had not knocked them down. He just sat beside them. Been so completely, quietly present that the walls had started to look like what they actually were. A woman standing in the rain refusing to admit she was wet. Kael, she said, his name careful in her mouth. I know, he said it gently, like he'd been carrying the same knowledge and had been waiting for her to arrive at it. I might not remember this tomorrow. I know what that is to ask of someone. He reached across the small desk and his hand covered hers, and where they touched, the thread between them went incandescent. Not bright like before burning, like it was consuming itself. But right now, in this exact moment, I am completely here, and I am completely yours. And I meant every word of this morning that I've already lost. He held her eyes. His were very clear, very still. That's all I have to give you. This, right now. That's everything, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word and she let it. He leaned forward. She leaned toward him. The thread blazed gold, then white, then something brighter than either. The door shook. 2 blows, hard and deliberate, and under them a voice. A woman's voice. Low, precise, carrying itself the way voices do when they've never had to raise themselves to be heard. Kael, open the door. It's your mother. Neither of them moved for 3 full seconds. Then Kael stood, and the man she'd come to know, the present tense, oatmeal eating, cabinet hinge fixing, fully awake man was still there, but layered now over something older, something with history she didn't know yet. My mother does not leave the shadow court, he said. He looked at her, and this time she saw the thing she'd been waiting for, the thing he never quite let her see. Fear. Real and present, and completely uncamouflaged. She's never left it, not in my entire life. His jaw tightened. Something is very, very wrong. Chapter 8. Queen Nerys Donreth didn't need a crown to make a room feel like a court. She needed only to stand in it. She was tall, dark-haired, every soft edge long since sanded away by years of ruling a kingdom that did not forgive softness, and what remained was a woman of such complete self-contained authority that even Seraphine's small cottage seemed to recognize her. The low ceiling, the loose floorboard, the herb bundles over the window, all of it seemed to adjust. She looked at her son for a long moment. Something moved through her face, genuine, raw, gone almost before it fully arrived, locked back behind the iron. "You look worse than my reports," she said. "You sent reports." "I always send reports." She turned to Seraphine. Her winter gray eyes moved over her with the same cataloging quality as Voss's, but differently Voss's eyes had priced her. These eyes were trying to understand her. The seamstress. Seraphine Ashveil. She didn't add anything, didn't step back. Something very small shifted in the Queen's expression. "You brought my son out of the ashwood and kept him alive." A pause, barely audible. "Thank you." "The oracle," Kael said. "We went today." "Alara." "I know," the Queen said. Silence. "You know," Kael said slowly, "the threadweaver and I have been in correspondence since the week after the curse was placed." Neris moved to the window. She stood with her back to them, which Seraphine recognized as the posture of someone about to say something they've been rehearsing. "I have known what the curse requires to break it since the 2nd month. I chose not to tell you." She paused. "I had reasons." "What reasons?" Kael said. His voice was careful. Dangerous, careful. "Because the last time I told someone, they immediately began preparing to offer themselves." She turned then, and her face was not iron anymore. It was the face underneath the iron, which was a mother's face, and it was wrecked. "Your brother, Kael, he was 17 years old. He came to me and said he understood the cost, and he had decided to pay it." Her voice did not break. It was worse that it didn't break. Voss found out. Voss made sure the ritual never completed. She looked at Kael with eyes that had been carrying this for months alone. "He is dead, Kael. Kael is dead." Kael said nothing. Seraphine watched it move through him, watched him receive the death of a brother he'd forgotten he had, receive it as new information, receive it as grief that was also completely fresh, because the curse had taken every iteration of this moment, and here it was again, new and terrible every time. He stood with it the way he stood with everything hard. Upright, still, taking it fully in, rather than looking away from it. "I didn't know," he said. "You never do," his mother said. It was the quietest thing she'd said, the most honest. Seraphine was still. She felt it, that low hum from Alara's cottage, present now in memory, persistent. Something coming. Something in the quality of the Queen's posture that told her there was more. A person who'd traveled from a place she'd never left was not here merely to deliver grief. "There's something else," Seraphine said. Neris turned to her, and there it was, guilt. Unambiguous and unguarded, the face of a woman who chose something she cannot undo and is standing in the consequences of it for the first time without a place to hide. "The ritual," the Queen said. "It is not a simple gift. Alara did not tell you everything." Seraphine's stomach dropped. What did she leave out? The exchange is irreversible. When someone gives their thread of fate to break the curse does not dissolve. It needs a vessel. Somewhere to go. The Queen's voice was steady and absolutely terrible. The person who breaks the curse does not just lose their fate thread. They take the curse into themselves. Every mechanism. Every element of what it does. The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. "Including the forgetting," Seraphine said. "All of it." Neris held her gaze with the full weight of someone who has been holding this alone for a very long time and is setting it down now with both hands, progressively, over weeks. Recent memories first, then older ones, then everything. every person they had ever loved, every moment that had ever mattered. Permanently, completely, without recovery. No, Kael's voice sliced across the room. He stepped forward. No, that is not. Kael. Seraphine's voice was quiet, firm. Seraphine. He turned to her, and his face was stripped of everything practiced, everything composed. He was just there, entirely. All of him present and desperate and unguarded for the first time since she'd known him. No, that is absolutely not something I will allow. You don't get to allow or disallow what I choose to do, she said. She said it gently because it was gentle. That's the whole point. His jaw was working. His hands were fists. The burns on his forearms blazed dark and bright, and dark again. There is one more thing, the Queen said. Her voice pulled both of them back. Nerys was looking at Seraphine, only at Seraphine. And in her gray eyes was something Seraphine recognized with a cold, sliding certainty that preceded understanding by 3 seconds. Guilt. Not the guilt of sharing bad news, the guilt of having caused it. The ritual has a beginning, the Queen said carefully. A first step that initiates the exchange. Without the vessel's willing participation, it cannot begin. She paused a breath, a brace. But it has a contingency. If the Oracle has identified the right vessel and needs the process to begin before the vessel is fully informed, she can initiate the first step herself. With contact. Physical contact. Another pause. Once the first step is initiated, regardless of how it cannot be reversed, the ritual runs. The hum from Alara's cottage. The strings shivering. The pressure of the Oracle's thumbs in her palms, finding something specific. Give me your hands. She started it, Seraphine said. Her voice was very even. Alara. When she held my hands, she started the ritual without telling me. Yes, the Queen said. The word fell like a stone into still water. The silence that followed it spread in every direction. Kael moved toward Seraphine with an urgency that was completely new in him, all that practiced stillness gone. His hand found her arm. The thread between them blazed white. Then we stop it, he said. We go back to Alara and we stop it right now. It cannot be stopped, the Queen said. Only completed or refused. Then Seraphine refuses it. He said it the way he'd said no earlier absolute, without inflection, a wall. Right now, she refuses and we find another. If she refuses, Nerys said, your curse continues. And given the rate of acceleration in the past 2 days, she stopped. She looked at her son. The iron held. But Seraphine could see, watching her, the exact cost of holding it. You have 4 days at most, perhaps 5. After that, the forgetting is complete. The room was absolutely still. Seraphine stood in it and did the only arithmetic that mattered. Not the survival arithmetic she'd been running her whole life. Not the gap-closing, cost-projecting, tomorrow-bracing calculations she'd been making since she was 17. Something different. Something that lived not in the future, and not in the past, but exactly, precisely, in the present moment, which was the only place this decision could live. She thought about Finn's laugh. She thought about Lyra materializing out of crowds with flour on her face. She thought about her mother's voice, which she could still hear if she was very quiet and very still. She thought about what it would mean to one day forget the sound of it. She thought about Kael. Not abstractly. Specifically. The way he ate. The way he listened. The way he said her name like it deserved to be said carefully. The way he'd taught her, simply by existing beside her, how to stop drowning in a tomorrow that wasn't promised. She thought about how, in 4 days, he would look at a journal entry with her name in it and feel nothing. Would read about her the way you read about a stranger. How long? She said. Do I have to decide? Queen Neris looked at the window. Through it. At the sky. At the horizon where the darkness was beginning just barely. Just at the very edge to suggest the future presence of something lighter. Not dawn. Not yet. The memory of dawn. Hours away. Sunrise, she said. The ritual reaches the point of no return when the sun clears the tree line. After that, whether you choose or not, the exchange completes on its own. The decision must be made before the light comes. Seraphine looked at the horizon. The darkness was complete. Nothing yet. Just the weight of the night, and somewhere, impossibly far, the idea that morning would come. 4 hours. 4 hours to decide whether to forget every person she had ever loved in order to save the man who had shown her that loving them, right now, fully, without one eye, always on the exit was the only thing that had ever actually mattered. Kael's hand was still on her arm. The thread between them was burning itself bright as a second sun. She could feel the heat of it in her bones. She looked at him. He looked back. His eyes were the storm color, the blue-gray that shifted in different light. And right now, they were very dark and very close and full of everything he wasn't saying, because he was afraid that saying it would be the thing that decided her. She opened her mouth. And from the direction of Voss's soldiers, somewhere in the dark lanes of Valdris, came the sound of horses. More than one. Moving fast. Getting louder. Getting here. The queen moved to the window, her jaw set. He's not waiting until the end of the week, she said. Kael's hand left Seraphine's arm. He stepped toward the door with everything that had been buried returning to the surface. The burns lit dark and bright. The air in the room crackled. And for 1 second she saw him entirely. Not the gentle present tense man who fixed cabinet hinges and ate oatmeal like it was the last meal on earth, but also the prince, also the heir, also the thing that Voss had spent years trying to erase before it could become fully itself. He looked back at her, just once, just for a second. Whatever you decide, he said. I need you to know that this... He stopped. Started again. Right now, this moment. I would not trade it for 1,000 guaranteed tomorrows. The door burst open, and the night came pouring in,